Hello, welcome to another episode of the Liberated Women podcast. I'm so excited because today I have a beautiful guest on the podcast. Her name is Sasha Marie Allen, and she's joining us all the way from Brazil, which is super exciting. So we're actually pretty much in the same continent, kind of. I'm in Central America. You're just like a little bit further south in South America. So that's really exciting. We're both in Latin America. And I'm really excited to have Sasha on. I met her through another group that we're both in, a women's group. So I'm going to let Sasha introduce herself to you. And we're going to have a really juicy conversation today. So welcome, Sasha.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here. And my name is Sasha. I'm a medical doctor and a divine feminine mentor. I work with women to fully express themselves, to belong to themselves, and to fall in love and feel this freedom from within.
A beautiful mission, something that I obviously am passionate about too, and so are the listeners that listen to this podcast. This is all about your liberation. This is all about unshackling yourself and releasing those chains and all the conditioning to allow yourself to really feel comfortable in your body, comfortable in your spirit, comfortable in your authenticity, in your expression, in your creativity, in your voice. And today, I guess specifically, we'll talk about in your sensuality and your sexuality. So I would
Mm.
love to know from you, Sasha. You said you're a medical doctor. So how did you make the transition from being a medical doctor into doing this kind of work? Because obviously there's you started somewhere connecting with the body and now you're in a different space. So I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah. So it was 7 years ago, actually, when I was in Rio. I was doing an internship here at the hospital, and I was really unhappy with what I was doing. I felt like I was super disconnected from my body, from my pleasure, from my soul, from my spirit, from my joy. Like I was just being in service, but not feeling that I'm in service to myself. So I really felt that my soul awakened here because I was like, there must be more to life than this. There must be more to life than just doing something that I'm not passionate about. And I just feel like I was born for something much greater than this. So it first took me into the journey of like functional nutrition, yoga, integrative medicine, holistic medicine. So I started my business in the end of 2019, and I was already doing shadow work and inner child healing. So I was like complementing all of what I learned with Reiki, psychology, life coaching. So I did like a bunch of certifications after medical school, and I started doing one-on-one sessions. And then I didn't have my period for a year and a half. And that was when I moved to Bali. That was like my awakening of the feminine. It's like something is wrong here because I'm doing this liberation, but my sexuality, I feel when we go to our sexuality, it's like the deepest awakening that a woman can have. And I noticed so much shame from my lineage and from growing up Catholic.
Mm.
So, oh my God, it's like I had so many limiting beliefs about like what sex is, that sex is dirty, and like wanting, showing out desire is dirty, and all of these things. So, my lack of my menstruation first took me on a journey to connect and feel and start speaking with my womb, feeling my womb. Like, what? Speaking with organs? Like I've never heard of this before. Like I was someone who lived so much in my mind. So for me to be able to like connect, I was so disconnected and drop into my body. Like I started feeling things that I never felt before in my life. I started working with yoni eggs and doing like body work and my own intuitive practices like mirror work, talking to myself in deep in meditation and receiving my own healing touch. And all of this started bringing me back to like reclaiming parts of myself, like slowly. And then I got my period back after. So I started this process in September, and in January I got my period back. Also, like started eating foods according to my cycle. So really studying my cycle in a completely different way that I studied in medical school.
Mm.
And from there, it was like a journey of relating to other men, and then seeing like how was I feeling in my body, like how what I was still considering like pleasure for men in a sense, you know? And after already connecting with my body and touching myself, I was like, there is something that, it's like it's an unraveling. And in 2020, I I was pleasuring myself in the shower and I fell and I fractured my elbow. And I'm telling you, the first feeling I thought was like, whoa, like I am being punished. I'm
Mm.
being punished because I'm feeling so good. I'm feeling so much pleasure in my body. That was like my conditioning. So Yeshua and Mary Magdalene started coming to me that time. And I was like, Jesus, I don't want to do anything to do with Jesus because I grew up Catholic. I don't want, I was like, no, 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 no. And then he comes to me, but I feel this like love and light. And so for me, it was like regaining trust and also learning how to listen. And I
Mm.
didn't know anything about sacred sexuality before. But then when Mary Magdalene was introduced to me, I was like, whoa, okay, this is something big. And I resisted, like I was always going in, but resisting a lot for a very long time and going deep into my practices with crystal pleasure ones and like fully. And I read in books, I was like, oh, because I never did like a full-on course on tantra or initiate. It's like I was receiving these things and doing it from my remembrance,
Mm.
my own remembrance, and then being like, oh, like this is a thing. Oh, okay. And then also connecting with other men that are on the tantric path, and that was like another awakening. And also then noticing like the duality of sexuality, like what does liberation mean to me.
Mm.
So I didn't start straight away with the sacredness. It was like first like an exploration. Oh my God, like I am free now. Like what does this mean? And then like learning about myself in the process, learning how to like deal with the shame, deal with this guilt, like move, alchemize it. So yeah, it's been a wild journey.
Mm. That sounds like a really wild journey, and there's so much to unpack in that. I think, first of all, there's the religious conditioning for those people that grew up with an idea of God or an idea of Jesus that is perhaps a false and toxic, dare I say it, like a toxic way of approaching a doctrine that isn't necessarily the truth or the remembrance, as you said, of what it is. And then this like guilt and this shame that comes along with that immediate thought of, I fell in the shower. It's a punishment because I was allowing myself to feel pleasure. And I think so many women, myself included on this journey, uh, have stopped themselves from feeling pleasure because it's such an overwhelming sensation when we were told that we weren't allowed to experience it, or that if we did, then it was, a sin, or it was dirty, as you said, or all of these kind of words that we associate, um, or it can get you in trouble, or it can be dangerous for you, like, what the kind of things that they teach you in schools, but they don't really teach you anything, or they do a little bit more nowadays. As a ex-teacher, I can kind of speak to some of the stuff that they do teach in schools nowadays around a little bit more about conscious relating and integrity and consent and things like that. But really, not when I was growing up, for sure, we didn't get taught any of this stuff. And as you were talking about Yeshua and Mary Magdalene, who I deeply connect with too, like I was once on a walk with my partner. It was in the Cotswolds, this beautiful countryside in the UK. We used to go every year with a camper van when we lived in the UK, and we were on a walk, and we were kind of like in a ceremonial walk. Like, so we were, yeah, it was a medicine walk. And there was this one point in the journey where I just like, I laid on the ground, and I remember all of this anger rising inside of me. And I just went, they cut me out the Bible and they called me a whore like this. And I like screamed it out loud. And I was like, whoa, okay. Like, I know, I remember it. Like, I remember them doing it to me as in like the fractal of me, that we are all fractals of that energy of Mary Magdalene. It's like, I am not Mary Magdalene. I'm not like a prophesizing to be that, but I've been there. I remember it on many occasions. Like, that's not the only experience that I've had of it. I've had many, many experiences with it. And this whole journey around like, yeah, just the shame that so many women feel around it, and the number of women that have unfortunately experienced the total opposite of sacred sexuality and have actually been abused through it and mistreated through it and had these horrible experiences which shut them down, put them into freeze mode, shut their voice down, shut down their throats, shut down their wombs. And even the idea of that exploration is scary. It's like, where do you start? So I guess that's a good question to segue into, is if someone is listening to this and they're like, whoa, yeah, I definitely would love to liberate myself in that area of my femininity. I'd love to be more sensual. I'd love to connect more deeply with my pleasure. Where do I start with this? What advice can you give them about that?
I'd start by just looking at your beautiful yoni in the mirror and speaking with her and touching her.
Because I think so for me, that I once went to I made a very, very beautiful friend at a festival who was running a yoni steaming workshop, and I'd never done it before. And she makes her own herbs. It's passed down through her grandmother in the lineage. And I went into the tent. It was peeing. I remember it was peeing with rain outside. I went in the tent, and she was like, "I'm so sorry, sis. Like, we're not doing it today because the weather conditions aren't right, and I don't have a fire in here, and it's too cold." And like, we did do that. We did do some yoni gazing, but like, she built us up to that point. So if there is like a woman who's really deeply, like, she's been sexually abused, or like she's got a real freeze or a fear around this part of her body, like, starting with yoni gazing in the mirror might still be far too much. I mean, I've worked with clients who they can't even look at themselves in the mirror and tell themselves they love themselves. Like, even that's too much for them to begin with. So if we were to like strip it back and go back even further, like, what would be
Mhm.
the first real kind of gentle way, let's say, to start connecting with your own body when you've been taught or told that you can't?
I
I'm like,
would say
for those of you that are watching the video, by the way, I already just started like hugging myself.
just hugging
for,
yourself.
for those of you that are not watching the video on YouTube and you're just listening to this on the podcast, as I was asking that question, I just like gently started to hug myself
I
because
was,
it felt like the right
I
thing
was
to do.
I start hugging and just like gently caressing, or even just the heart, gently like caressing the heart and saying, "It is safe. I'm here. I'm here with you. It is safe. It is safe."
Yeah, and I think it's that safety piece that is so important. Like, the world of tantra is a whole other world that you kind of have to be ready to go into and face a lot of the stuff that is going to come up for you in those spaces, and the edges that you're going to get pushed to in those spaces. So like, for the average woman who who is new to this world and is like curious and open to knowing that there's a path for her there and wants to liberate that part of herself, but is like, I have no idea what touching myself even feels like. Just a gentle hand on the heart, maybe a hand on the womb, like a hand on
Mhm.
heart and a hand on the womb, and just maybe even just holding it there and just saying, like what you said, it's safe, I'm here, like I can feel you. Just even acknowledging, like, how does my heart feel? How does my womb feel when I touch it? What does that feel like? And from there, where can they kind of journey to next, would you say?
I feel like it really depends on
Mm,
each woman, each journey. But I would say to start just touching the thighs and just start allowing themselves to receive their own healing touch in the yoni. They don't even have to go inside, just around it,
mm,
just allowing themselves to feel themselves.
mm. And when you first started to do that, like what sensations came up for you that made you feel uncomfortable or kind of pushed you to an edge? And how did you then move through that when you felt that level of uncomfortableness or you felt an edge or a level of unsafety at that point? What allowed you to move through that so that you could continue on this journey?
I remember I started working with the obsidian yoni egg. Like I didn't even start with the rose quartz or jade. I went like straight into the trauma. Let's go. And I remember I was like, I was still skeptical.
Mm,
And when I took it out, I just had these cathartic moments, like laying on the floor, like screaming and crying. I was like, whoa, I never felt this in my life. And then I messaged the body worker that I was working with, and she told me, "Oh, that's normal. That's part of the process," and
mm,
that made me feel like okay, like calm because I didn't know what was going on. So I also did a lot of I put a lot of music and just breathing and moving and dancing with my body.
mm,
So I did a lot of that and I just allowed to release, 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 release. And then be a moment, it's like, okay, it stopped. And then I felt like calm again. And there was a time later on when I started working with my first doing like yoni mapping and cervical dearmoring. It was the first time I used a wand for the cervix. I was like also warned about this. So that again helped because I was like, okay, I don't feel like we can do this just without any guidance. I was having always like guidance from
mm,
people. So I started feeling this burning sensation like it's a UTI, and they said it's normal. And I think it was like about 1 month or 2 months that it's like I didn't even want to go down there, didn't even want to touch. I just let it be. And then when I felt ready again, I was like, okay. I started again just gently, just putting the wand on top of my womb so it feels like this safety. And then starting again and releasing more because our cervix is a connection to our nervous system, to our heart. And when it's so numb and it's so close, it means that the heart is also closed. And then I realized I didn't even know what a closed heart felt like. What do you mean I have a closed heart? And it's been like such a beautiful journey because I didn't even know how to understand the difference between orgasms, the
mm,
difference between sensations. I didn't know that. And then like it's so beautiful when we go on this journey and we get to know all different parts. Like okay, this is that. This is feels like that. And then the cervical orgasm. Oh my God! It's just like this opening, and it can be like bursting into tears, bursting into like screaming, bursting into like laughter, like all emotions. And
mm,
usually when I have those, and it still happens. It's not like it happens when because we are always opening to deeper levels. So whenever it's like I don't know like a time frame, but I always allow myself time to integrate this openness because it's like just a blast open and for my nervous system to integrate. Okay, like this is what's going on. It is safe for us to be this open. We feel we are safe to have an open heart because we tend to we were taught to believe that our openness is it's fragile
Yeah, it's
and it's
vulnerable. Well, it's vulnerable, isn't it? It's like it's
vulnerable.
vulnerable to share your heart. It's vulnerable to use your voice to share what you really think. It's vulnerable to open up to love. It's vulnerable to be in that space because from that space, obviously, we can and we have been hurt, in this lifetime and past lifetimes, and we're healing not just our own. I think with this kind of work, what's so powerful is that we're not just clearing this for ourselves. And yes, we carry our own trauma, and yes, we carry our own ancestral wounding, and we carry it through our lineage, but we also carry it for the collective. And I know that when I've had those experiences that you're talking about, those like kind of sexual healing, essentially, where it's like I'll literally have burst into, yeah, anger, rage. Like my legs have been shaking and I've been like crying uncontrollably. And I'm so lucky and blessed because my partner just holds that for me, and he's like there, and he's helping me shamanically with it, and he's like assuring me I'm safe, and he's like let it out, like it's good. I'm so grateful for that. But at the same time, it's really intense, and it's like I know that it's not just for me. I know that it's for other women. I know that it's for the lands that's being raped. I know that it's for like the women that are displaced from their land, displaced from their safety. The way that I've always felt in my ancestral lineage, like my ancestors have been kicked off so many different lands, just this like lack of safety in this land. Like I don't have a base, and your base is literally like where your sexuality is, right? Like your root, your sacral, like it's the lower end of your body. It's so if you don't feel safe and you're being displaced, and your ancestors have, and the world is being constantly displaced, then how can we feel that sense of safety and anchoring to, like, because for me, like the sensation of pleasure is very it's like a higher energy. For me, it's like you experience it as a higher realm, like it comes from a higher realm. So if you don't have the grounding, and you don't have the base, and you don't have the anchoring and the safety, you then can't allow yourself to go up into the pleasure. It's like laughter, right? Like laughter, like it's uncontrollable sometimes, and it's like you have to surrender and let it go. Like it's the same with this idea of like, oh, like I'm allowed to laugh. It was interesting in the women's circle I held a couple of weeks, it was last weekend, a couple of weeks ago. One of the ladies that came, she was like, oh, I found myself not allowing myself to smile, even though I wanted to, because I've been so conditioned that it's like I'm not allowed to experience that joy and pleasure. So she like stopped herself from smiling, even though there were things that made her laugh. And she realized it, and she shared it with me in the circle, which she shared it with me afterwards as well. And I think that's so common, because it's like if we don't have the safety here, how can we allow ourselves to it's like for the feminine to go wild and messy and chaotic and experience that, she needs the structure and the holding. And if that isn't there, like literally in the shape I'm making with my hands, I feel like if you're listening on the podcast, I'm now making like a lotus womb cervix shape with my hand as the structure, the container, for which, like, imagine it's like a bowl, and like she's inside it, and now she can move because she's got the structure around. But if that's taken away, like where does she go? And I think for so many women, we experience that lack of safety and anchoring and grounding. So we feel like, oh shit, how can we allow ourselves to feel that pleasure? Like it's not safe. It's too much. It's too dangerous. It's too chaotic and wild and untamed for us to go there. So I think what you said about working with, having the guidance and having a practitioner is super important when it comes to this kind of work. I think there's things you can do by yourself at home, like on a very gentle, nourishing level of the self hug and the self touch. And then when it comes to things like you mentioning the wands and the eggs, like even for someone like me that I've experimented with so many things and I'm so open, I think I would still probably want some guidance in that particular area because of the catharsis, because of what could come out, and to be held in that. So would you say that those sorts of practices, it's good to try it first with a trained practitioner to guide you through that?
I would say so. If you haven't done like any work before, or even if it's like, even if you feel like that you know that emotional things are coming up and that you want to be held, yes. I personally, when I did these programs, actually at the time, maybe I don't remember ever sharing much. Maybe I could have shared more.
Mm,
I did when that UTI thing happened, and it was a lesson for me, because today I would have shared like what's going on, because I feel like I went a lot through the process by myself. Maybe I feel maybe also like a bit of shame in like sharing everything, even though everyone was, going through their own process. But I would say yes, because there's so much then alchemy that happens just in the being witnessed in
hmm
that vulnerability in the process, and makes it like, oh, then it's like not something that we have to just
hmm
hide again, and just go through it alone again.
Yeah,
So
100%. I literally just released a podcast episode saying being witnessed is so liberating, exactly for that reason. Like, that's exactly what happens in my women's circles. That's exactly what's happened. It happened in a few situations that I described in that episode, actually, of like I recently went to a dance class, but it was not really dance. It's kind of like a sensual dance where she guides you through the body and you get to explore and express yourself in certain ways, and then she gives you like this very small choreography, but it's like very sexy, and you get to watch the other women do the dance first and then they watch you. And like when I watched the other women, I was like, wow, it's like a piece of art. It's so beautiful to watch this. But I was also triggered because I was thought, oh shit, I don't look like that. Like I'm not as beautiful as them or as sexy as them. And but like in the past version of me would have said like, my I can't do this. I look ridiculous. Like I'm embarrassed. Like I can't. And this time I noticed the trigger come up, but I was like, I'm noticing it because I'm witnessing this woman and she looks so damn sexy and so beautiful. It's like art. I want to look like art. I'm art. I want to look like a piece of art. And so it was a totally different trigger. And I went back to the class again. And this time I felt more comfortable and more confident. And then when people were watching me, I didn't care so much. And it was really liberating. And I'd love to keep going back to this kind of work because there is such a power in being witnessed. And not only is there a power in being witnessed, but like when you do that, it also gives permission then for other women to do the same. And so that's the kind of really beautiful aspect of this work, is actually the more we share about this and the more we talk about this and the more we debunk the shame around this and the more we start to share our stories, the more permission we give to other women also to be like, oh, actually, yeah, I experienced that and it was really quite horrible. And the idea around sex and what we see growing up culturally, you mentioned about Catholicism, and then it depends on your culture, your religion, but also what we're exposed to in media and what we're exposed to in films, and like, oh, all of a sudden she's reaching an orgasm in like 2 minutes. No, like there's just all these things that we are exposed to, and then there's the whole issue of porn. It's just like we could go on a whole other conversation about that, but it's coming back to the understanding, isn't it, really, that everything is sacred because we are created from source and we are divinity. We are part of that divine creation. So every single aspect of us is divine and therefore sacred. And we just forget that because we're taught otherwise. And we're taught that it's the total opposite of sacred. We're taught that it's a sin. And so coming back to that remembrance, that awakening is just so deeply, deeply important for us as women. And so I really want to thank you for coming on today and sharing your personal story and sharing, um, even dropping in ideas around things like someone listening to this might not even know what a yoni egg is or a crystal wand is, and just like the exploration of, oh, there are things out there that I can use to support me, maybe not even knowing what the word yoni means, right? Like these are all concepts that maybe someone is very unfamiliar with. It's at the start of their journey and it's giving them little nuggets of things to think about and to explore with. And there are many amazing sacred sexuality workers out there. There are many women who to traverse this path and are doing incredible work in the world to liberate women in this area. So I will definitely drop your social media links into the show notes. So if people want to explore and want to connect, they can. I have one last question for you, which is a question I ask all of my podcast guests, and that is, what does being a liberated woman mean to you?
A liberated woman means to me to feel at peace with all of the women I am today and whoever I will be that I still don't know yet.
Beautiful.
Which is like a daily journey of liberation. We
Mhm.
die and are reborn every single day. So I feel it's that embracing the nature of our cycles, just like Mother Nature.
And
Yeah.
that's a beautiful note to end it on, because even though I won't be publishing this podcast episode for a little while, today is actually spring equinox. So it's very much about the feminine. It's very much about the seasons of change. It's very much about evolution. So those of you that are listening to this podcast, we recorded this on the 20th of March 2024. That was the spring equinox. The spring equinox actually came into Costa Rica and probably Brazil at like 3 a.m. on the 19th of March, and then into the other part of their northern hemisphere in the UK for certain on the 20th of March. So this is a beautiful time to be talking about like femininity and fertility and blooming and opening, and like the kind of, yeah, the sexuality, sensuality of new life and creation on this earth. So aho to the cycles of life, aho to the feminine. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank
Yes.
you.
And to
Such
those
a
of
pleasure.
you, yeah, beautiful. And to those of you listening, thank you so much for tuning in again to another episode of the Liberated Women podcast. I cannot wait to tune in with you again next week. Have a magical day.